Welcome, everyone. I'm Kerry Schruntz on behalf of the School of Business and Wake Forest Executive Education. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Through the use of computers, cell phones, and other smart devices, we generate enormous amounts of data that companies can use to better understand customers, track products, more effectively utilize resources, and increase productivity in the bottom line. The data analytics life cycle substantively impacts decision-making in areas such as marketing, financial forecasting, operations, and systems IT. Understanding descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics capabilities allows us to take advantage of unforeseen opportunities and analyze risks critical to the vibrancy of most organizations. For the next 45 minutes or so, Jordan Goldmeyer will offer perspectives on the current trends in analytics and provide an overview of data visualization with Power BI. Dr. Jeff Kam, Associate Dean with the School of Business, will then offer thoughts on the career and organizational benefits of a certificate in analytics. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone's audio has been muted. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them to me in the chat box on your Zoom control panel. Jordan and Jeff will have time for questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll address as many as possible. Today's webinar will be recorded, a copy of which will be forwarded to you in the next few days. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague Whitney Strickler, who will be assisting in today's webinar and providing post-presentation follow-up. As I mentioned a few moments ago, our presenter today is Jordan Goldmeyer. Jordan is an internationally recognized analytics professional and data visualization expert, author, and speaker. He is the author of Advanced Excel Essentials and Dashboards for Excel. Jordan has led consulting engagements with the NATO Training Mission, the Pentagon, Principal Financial, H&M, and the Air Force. His work has been cited by and quoted in the Associated Press, Bloomberg Business Week, and American Express Open Forum. He's also been an Excel MVP award holder and has had the chance to provide feedback and direction to Microsoft product teams. I'll now go ahead and turn things over to Jordan.
Sorry, I feel like I hit that unmute button twice and remuted myself. But thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. It's my pleasure to talk about data this afternoon. And as Kerry mentioned, there is a certificate of analytics program that I've been, I've had the pleasure, I should say, being invited to with Wake Forest University, and will be teaching the descriptive elements of that. And so, my career has really brought me, face to face with a lot of different types of descriptive analytics. I think it's often forgotten, it's often forgotten that it's not just a matter of showing your data and turning into a visualization. You really do need to get it from muck, as it were, from the raw form to the data. And so we're going to have some examples today of doing just that as well. It will be kind of a preview of what I will be talking about in the program. So let me go ahead and get that set up. And, they say you should start a good presentation with a joke. So hopefully some folks would get this joke. But of course, if a pivot table walks into a bar, what does the bartender say? He says, "Hey, should I start a new tab?" And then hopefully some of you were able to groan at that one. And then, of course, the database that walks into the bartender says, "Hey, join any table." And then finally, my last bad joke, what comes after any good database joke? Well, of course, a sequel. Now, let's go ahead and just dive into Power BI. But before I do that, I want to make sure, I'm going to double check that it does say I'm sharing my screen. So I am relying on the folks here. If my mic goes out, if my screen goes out, just let me know, because I don't always know. I do a lot of these, and as you can see, I start talking and I don't stop. So we're really going to look at two different ways to use, two different scenarios, as it were, to use Power BI today. But before we even dive into that, I think it's important to understand, well, what is Power BI? And let's just take a step back further too, because I want to make sure I say this before I start. At least for today, sit back and relax. So there are files that we are going to be using. The files will be sent to you. I think they're in the chat. If not, if you miss it, that's okay. just make sure you understand the concepts I'm giving you. And then I want you to rewatch it with the download files that I give you. I also have step-by-step instructions. It'll be in the webinar recording. Will be sent to you as well. You should be able to have access to it. And so with all of that said, let's talk about Power BI, right? So I think most of us, if you asked us, well, what does the BI stand for, right? What does that stand for? Well, I think most of us would say business intelligence, as if saying this, and you'll have to forgive my spelling if I misspell stuff, as if saying business intelligence actually were to answer the question. And of course, that really begs the question, well, what is business intelligence? And when people ask me this through my career, I used to have an academic answer, but my answer is now to be more rhetorical, right? Well, what is analytics? What is data science? What is art? What is love? You know, I'm a mortal. I can't answer these things. I'm not quite sure what business intelligence is, if I'm being honest with you. It's like when people say, well, big data is defined by the 3 V's. And to me, all the V's are vendors. So I don't really know what these things are. So what I like to do is I go back to the beginning, right? So if I think to myself, what is the business intelligence workflow or the data workflow? It often looks like this, and it has very varying degrees in different organizations, right? So you get your data, you do some transformation on it. I'm going to just write TX for transformation. And then you have some sort of presentation out of it. So data could come from a data warehouse, right? You run SQL Studio. I don't know what you're doing on your side. And then it goes into some dashboard, some web-based dashboard, right? That could be one way to do it. You could have all your data in like multiple files on a shared drive. I used to just call a shared folder on the G drive. That's what I grew up calling it, but now they call it a data lake. And then, you know, maybe that comes in through some Excel process. This is kind of what I was doing when I was working with the Air Force way back when, Excel or Access, right? And then this comes into some sort of visualization front end, usually in Excel, usually in Access. Could be really anything. You know, it really doesn't matter whether this is Tableau, whether it's any other software tool. This is the basics, right, of working with data. Okay, so keeping this concept in our minds, what I would like to offer to you is that in many ways, in its most abstract, right, it goes information, transformation, presentation. So I call this in Advanced Excel Essentials, I call this ITP. If you're astute, you know I just probably ripped this from N-tier architecture and a bunch of other people who've thought about this problem, right? You know, a million different ways to say it. It doesn't really matter, but I want you to just think in terms of this, like 1, 2, 3, that this is the business intelligence workflow at its most base, right? Like we're not going to Gartner or Forrester and seeing all the different loops that they have. Like at its most base, this is what it looks like. And that's important. That is important because that really sets the stage of Power BI. So let us go back to the year of 2013, right? So 2013 happens. What happens in 2013? Microsoft release something called Power BI Suite. Okay, what is Power BI Suite? Well, through a whole bunches of like checking things behind Excel, going into this, you know, option and doing that, you can enable a slate of 4 different technologies, 3 to 4 depending on how you count them. All right, the first one is Power Query, the next one is Power Pivot, and then the final ones or 2s, as the case may be, is Power Maps. I should say this is Power Pivot with a P, and Power View over here. Okay, so Power Query, Power Pivot, Power Maps, and Power View. 3 different technologies, 1, 2, 3. And what Power Query allowed you to do is you could feed it data, right? And then you can do all these, and we're going to be doing Power Query today, so watch out. It would allow you to take data, as we'll see, and wrangle it, right? It'll transform it very, very, very quickly. Okay, so get it what we would call, if you did R or Python, you might call it a tidy data set, right? So Power Query is, and again, if you do any R or Python, it is what dplyr is to R, what matplotlib is to or maybe it's pandas. Sorry, what pandas is to Python, and So it really is a graphical interface of these technologies that are currently out there right now. So we have Power Query, right? And then Powerpivot, which we won't do a whole lot of, creates this data model that you can read data from it instantly and do work on very quickly. Like you want to sum a million rows, a few seconds, no problem. That's what Powerpivot does. It is really, well, I'll get to that in a second. And then finally, there's Power Maps and Power View. And this was a way that you could take all the data that came from here, and then from here, and like turn it into a chart really quickly. Okay, so what you might have noticed is that this is in fact ITP, Information Transformation Presentation, right? Excel or Microsoft put this in Excel 2013, but as it would happen, the world of data would get too big, right? And they couldn't contain it in Microsoft Excel. So they took these three technologies that follows the business intelligence workflow, and they put it into one additional technology called Power BI Desktop, and that's the one we're going to be talking about today. But note, all of these technologies started in Excel first, and I'm going to come back to Powerpivot now. Powerpivot is really, I don't know if you guys used Excel tables, and I mean tables with like a capital T here, not Excel, like Excel tables of a data range, but rather the technology when you went to the insert tab and there's pivot tables and insert table. You know, that created something called a structured reference where you could put one formula in one column and it would put it all the way down. And you could do some other cool stuff. Powerpivot just takes that a step further and allows you to do more operations on it and then feed it into a pivot table. But fundamentally, what I just described to you, Power BI allows you to do as well, but it does a lot more of it behind the scenes, but it's still the same functionality. All of which is to say, because Power Query is still in Excel and it's also in Power BI Desktop. Because remember, this is the confluence of these three technologies, that if you become good at Power Query in Excel, you will become good at it in Power BI Desktop because they are literally the same technology. And, you know, Powerpivot is very similar in Excel. It's just not as good as it is in Power BI. And Power Maps and Power View, why that's just the reporting view, which we're going to be talking about today in Power BI. So I wanted to lay that out for you because I think a lot of people are really confused about this tool and what it can do. So today, and let's see here, I'm at 113. Today, we're going to be talking about two things. I think our first one is going to be what I call the 20-minute dashboard. Doesn't always take 20 minutes. Sometimes it takes more. And then the other one after that, I have more of a Power Query, like very specific data management example. So this one's data management and data visualization. And then this one is almost like a specific data management one. And this one I'm probably going to end up rushing through, but you're not going to want to miss this one. So take a step back and relax. I have the step-by-step instructions in the download files. So don't worry if you don't get it all right away, but I want to show you how cool it is. And if you did come to the certificate program, which I definitely urge you to do, I would be doing these slower, right? It's just kind of like, I want to show you everything we have today. And we also want to support the analytics community and just let them know what's available. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to pull up this file here. So I have a file here called, on my computer, it's called staging, and that's where I just keep my files when I use to present. But if you had the download files, we'd be in example one. And don't worry if you miss the download files, they will be part of the recording. So let me just open up the completed version real quick. And Power BI is just opening up right now. It always takes a second. One thing is Power BI is very memory intensive. So if I do cut out things like that, I'm going to turn off my camera. We're going to free up more bandwidth for Power BI. So we're just going to give it a second, and you'll just let me know if I get choppy. All right, and so it did load up on the other screen. Let me put it over here. All right, and so one interesting aspect of Power BI, which you may or may not notice, is that Microsoft is doing these monthly updates to it, and so what that means is that it's not like getting stuff 2 or 3 years down the line like we used to do. These monthly updates mean that there's all these things that can break in it, right? And they're actually doing telemetry. They're actually watching you break it and sending diagnostics back. So, but it does mean that Power BI as a program is a lot more buggy than Excel was. What we're going to do here today is we're going to actually make this dashboard. Maybe we won't do the whole thing. I do want to show you how you get your data to this point of visualization. What you're looking at here is these are actually, these little circles here are actually locations of what they call a Link Wi-Fi system in New York. So Link NYC set up all these Wi-Fi kiosks, which if you ever lose your phone, they have a dial pad on it. They have advertising. What many people don't know is they also have a speed camera on them, you know, that like they're watching you. In addition to all the great benefits, they're actually watching you. And so that speed camera is actually writing to a service in real time, and we have access to that. So what we build might not look like this exactly. And I'm going to go ahead and just close this for now, because we'll start a new one. I just want to show you what it's going to look like at the end. And what I'll do here is I'm going to open up my lab PDF. This is with the step-by-step instructions in it. I'm going to just give it a second. Let's see, did it load up? I might have already had it up. It was up on my other screen. So when you do this, I already have it. It popped up on my other screen again. 1 second. This always happens. Okay, so when you do this, you will just click on the link that I have in here, and I'll leave it to you to go through that. This is the link from the Open Data New York City website, and it is a live link. So I've already copied it and pasted it to my other screen. So what I want to show you here is, this is, you can see that it's a .txt. And so what's happening is every time that it indicates a piece of data, it's going to write it to this .txt file, which you can get through this. And you can see here that this is in fact a tab separated file. Let's just zoom in real quick. Tab separated file. We have the IDs, or the column headers, the features at the top. And you can sort of see that it is laid out in a way that you could read it in, right? So this is a .txt. Power BI says, no, that's no problem. We don't really even care where we get our data from. So one of the great things about Power BI Desktop is that it has these things called connectors. And so as long as the connector follows whatever protocols that Microsoft has set up, it can talk to Power BI. And many of these things where we read our data from anyway, .txts are old protocols anyway, right? So it doesn't matter. What I'll do is the first time you come into Power BI, you'll go ahead and click Get Data. Because remember, ITP, what's the first thing we need to do? We need to get the data. That's the information side. So this is Get Data here. It's very similar to Excel. It looks a little bit nicer in Power BI. What we'll do is we're going to do a web. So I'm going to type in WE here so I can see web. This just means I'm going to pull it in from the web. Go ahead and click Connect. That's this yellow button. And now we have the URL it's asking for. So we'll just keep it on basic. We don't need anything advanced. I'll hit Control V. That's going to paste in the URL. Like I said, that URL is available within the download files. And of course, if you wanted to look at it on the Open City Government website, you can find it as well. So what Power BI is going to do is it's going to open up Power Query. So this is now officially Power Query, but they've put a nice mask on it. If you did this in Excel, it might look a little different. What I want to show you here is it actually put a table out here, and it was able to read all this data that, remember, was in quotes. It was text, so it was able to read it. And if we didn't want to do anything to this data, we would hit load right now. But I want you, if you're just starting out with Power BI, you're going to go ahead and always click transform. Always, always. So this is going to bring up Power Query, and it just brought it up on my other screen. So give me 1 second. I'm going to bring it up over on the screen that I'm sharing. You know, isn't it always the case that it doesn't do what you want it to do? Okay, so let's see here. Then I got to move this over a little bit, hit that maximize button. And of course, because I trained on this, it's gonna notice that I've reached out there before. So it said, do you want to refresh your data? But let's assume that I never made a connection to it before. This is what Power Query looks like. So sometimes it's called Get and Transform. Sometimes it's called Power Query. I think Microsoft's still figuring out which name they like. Power kind of scared people off, but Get and Transform, everyone didn't know what that was. So it is a querying tool. Now, one of the cool things about Power Query as part of Power BI, and Power Query is your data management go-to tool, it will take a series of steps for you. So the first step is it went out. So I'll click on this applied step. It went out, and you can kind of see it up here in my header. It went out to that website I gave it. It grabbed the contents and turned it in and said it was a CSV document, so it was smart. And then when it brought it in, you'll note that it has ID here, speed here, travel time here, status here. So it went through another steps. It promoted my headers because it noticed I had headers. And then one other thing is you'll notice here it says ID ABC, speed ABC, travel time ABC. So the ABC type is just a string type. It went through all of them right here where it says change type. I'll click on it. It went through all of them and then set them up to decimals, integers, dates, things like that. So we don't have a whole lot of time to go through all of that. What I want to show you here is, if I can just make this a little bit bigger, that Power Query is our go-to tool for doing queries on the data to make it tidy. So usually if I had more time, I'd go through all of these. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go from left to right, and we're going to fix up this data set. So I'm looking at the ID column here. I don't see any issues with it. It looks good. I'm looking at speed here. I'm noting that there are these zeros here. And if I look at travel time, I see zeros. And I look at status, I see this -101. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking -101, the date as of is 1978. This can't be right. So I'll go into, it doesn't really matter if I do it in speed, travel time, status, or date as of. I like status because a -101 feels like an error message. I'll click on this down arrow. This is very much like Excel filters right here. And I'll unclick that -101 like that. So we knocked out error statuses. I'll keep going. I have this date as of. We have the date here, but perhaps I want the time as its own column. So you'll note that when I did that filtered row step, it added an additional step here. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to add column. And with this clicked on, I'm just going to click time because it knows it's a date time type. So if I click on this time one, and I'll click time only, it popped over a column over here that just has the time. And you can see it just says inserted time over here. So it's keeping track of everything I do. And it is, of course, the case that you can walk back what you're doing as well if you need to understand it. Okay, so we inserted the time. And then this date here, if I just want to transform the column itself just to have the date, I can click transform date as of and click date like that. Date only. You see that right there? Perfect. So that looks good. The link ID, I don't think we're going to be using that. So I'm going to right click and hit remove. Watch that. It just leaves. Now, this is the most interesting problem we'll have here. So we have the link points, and what this is the latitude and the longitude of where our link system is. And you'll note that there's a lot of latitude and longitude points. So we have this comma separating, and then we have the two different points. That's our latitude and longitude. And then we have all these spaces. So there's really a polygon that it's actually watching with the speed camera, but we don't really need that level of specificity. So what we want to do from a data standpoint is just pull out the latitude and longitude and knock out the rest of that. And, I can't totally see the chat. So I know that we'll have questions at the end. If you are asking those questions, I saw the chat just kind of popped up. I will address them at the end, no problem. So what I'm going to do here is I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, how do I first get rid of those extra points? Well, we have some really cool tools in Power BI. And remember, we used to have to do this in Excel, right? And it was a lot of different things, find the space, all that stuff. Here, you just click on the column. Under my transform tab, I'll click extract. So what do I want to extract? We have text before a delimiter. I click on that. So what is the delimiter in this case? Well, we see it's a space, right? Because I want to put the lat and long. I just want to get rid of everything after, or keep everything before that space. So under delimiter, I'm just going to hit space like that. So you can't really see it, but I did hit space there. Go ahead and click OK. It removed those. Incredible. Now, I actually want to turn this into two different columns, right? So we have the split column right here. It's unbelievable how fast this goes. I'm still in awe. I'll hit split column. We'll hit by delimiter like that. Now, note, it tries to be smart. So it said, do you want to split by this period? But I'm looking at this 4.74, maybe that's farther out than we want in terms of digits, but I don't want it to split on a period. This is separated by commas. So always make sure to double check. Don't just blindly hit that OK button, because smart Power BI is not actually that smart. So I'll go ahead. I put in a comma here. This is going to separate this into two columns. Link points 1, link points 2. And I can easily just type in lat here for the latitude. We'll type in long over here for the longitude. And you'll see that it kept all my steps, which is pretty amazing. And we'll even go farther deeper into that in our next problem. So then this encoded polyline, I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to click on encoded polyline visual. We don't really need to know any of that. That stuff's kind of I think for a GIS system. I don't really know what that's for. So I'll hit remove. It isn't for me. That's all I can say. So we have the time over here, and then we have the date over here. So what I want to do is I want to move the date to the right side of my table, so I can just drag it like this. But if you drag it, it's very slow. So what I like to do is you can just kind of right click here and click move, and then it says to end like that. Okay, so at this point, when you have your data managed, as it were, when it's ready, right? Good idea to always just go through it again, see if everything makes sense. ID, all of these, these data types that are assigned to the latitude and longitude look good, right? 1.2, that's the kind of, this means a decimal type. So that's what we want. It's not a string. Owner looks good. That's a categorical type. Transcom ID, I don't think we need it, but we're going to keep it anyway. Link name, I'm cool with that. Time, date as of. Okay, so it looks good. So I'll hit close and apply. So basically what I did is I created a set of rules, right? So now it's going to go out and hit the query, pull the data back, and then apply the set of rules. The best part is when Power BI works with the data, it's not working with everything that I just messed with, right? It's actually going to be worked with the data, the table that I served up after I did all that wrangling on it. And that's very important from a memory standpoint, that we don't have all this extra stuff we don't need. So that's the Power Query side. Now we're in the Power, remember I said there's 4 technologies, Power View and Power Maps. That's where we are now. This became the reporting tab in Power BI. And so much like other tools that are significant right now, like Adobe, you have this visualization over here, which is kind of like a canvas, and then you'll drop your visualizations on. So I'm going to take this globe right here, and if I just click it, it's going to drop it here. Note that very similar to a pivot table in Excel, you have these different field wells where you drop fields. So remember, this is about addressing the issues of access in Excel and the things that they couldn't do, and how do you streamline that process? So you'll see here we have a latitude and a longitude right here. So I'll grab the lat. We'll see if it lets me do this. I might have to take an extra step. I'm going to drop the long in here, but I think this should work, having done this enough. Okay, so it dropped the latitude and longitude. Now, whenever I do this, there's always this ghost one out here in Newark or in New Jersey, and I'm just not certain that this one is a correct data point. So I always right-click and hit exclude. That one is the bane of my existence. Okay, so right now, these are all the locations of the link systems in New York, but perhaps we need a few more things to help us truly understand this, right? So remember, borough is a categorical variable. So watch what happens if I take that and I drop it onto the legend. Well, knowing that actually the borough is labeled next to the data points, right, in the data, it's very easy for Power BI to say, oh, these are different categories. These are different levels within the data. So it very easily created that labeling up here. And of course, if we wanted to zoom in, I could click on the filter tool. That's this one right here. This is called the filter or slicer. And I could take the borough, and if I just drop it on that, it goes through and identifies that these are the unique values, right? So if I want to zoom in, I can click Brooklyn here, Queens, Bronx, and so forth. Now, this tells us where they are. It doesn't give us a lot of information about it, right? Perhaps we want to understand what was the average speed of people driving, and see if we can visualize that. So I have size over here. If I click on my map, you see there's a size property. And I can take this speed here, which is, again, indicated. It's listed next. If you just imagine a table in your head, you have these lat long points. This speed, so long as it's in the same column on the table, which is very important when we get into DAX, which we'd be doing more in the certificate program. So long as it's able to do that, say this is like a data point next to it in the table, it's able to plot it. Now, when I drop this in, you'll see that it has an automatic aggregator next to it. It's giving me the sum of the speed. That could be interesting, right? What is the total sum that people are going over? I think for me, I want the average. So I'll click on this down arrow. And again, astute folks will note that these are the same sort of summaries you can do on a pivot table when you click on the field value setting. So I'll click average here. And it doesn't change it that much. But you can see that actually in certain areas, the average is significantly more than others. So one last thing here is I want to move to my next example. I don't want to belabor this one. There's a few more step-by-step items. One of the weird things here, if you want a nice like checking or a nice slicer style, you can click on your slicer here and click on the paintbrush, and you'll click in general. And here where it says orientation, you can click horizontal. Now, that's kind of a weird way to get to it, because if you do the other class, you'll see that when we go through all the different visualizations, slicers have a whole bunch of different things to do that you can do that actually come about by clicking on this down arrow. So I don't know why they hide that in there rather than put it in this down arrow where I can just change this to a drop down. You know, these are the things that I complained to Microsoft about. Okay, so we have that data. Let's just do one more table and then or one more chart, and then I'll move on to my next example. So I'm going to drop this chart in here. You know, we have boroughs, but we also have owner is kind of an interesting thing. So I'm going to drop that into the axis here. And next, I'm going to drop, rather than the average speed, let's just do a pure count, right? How many incidences, how many records belong to that owner? So I don't really need, I'm going to actually drop in, I'll drop an ID because that's the most basic. You know, I could count any of them. So I'll drop that in. Now note, ID is summing up right now. So that's not what we want. And there are ways to fix that in terms of what its automatic aggregation is. Power BI is just trying to be smart. So we'll just do a count here. And we'll see how that changes the distribution. And of course, with Power BI, everything is flexible. So if I unclick Brooklyn here, you'll note I see everything. And of course, if I click here, it'll just zoom in on the map, on the count and where they are. And then you can hover over the map and figure out different parts of information. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that example. We called it the 20-minute dashboard. Feel free to throw your questions on that. I'm going to move on. I know we really only have 15 more minutes, maybe 20 if I stretch it of me talking. So, and I really, really, really want to show you this next example. So just wanted to show you there. I pulled data from the web. We pulled it from the web very quickly, was able to turn it into a dashboard. Actually, I'm not going to save this one because the one that you have completed is better. Okay, so I want to show you this other example because that was a taste of what we can do. But let me, because I think this next one's going to rock your world. So let us say, for instance, and this is really was inspired by a customer that I have. Let us say, for instance, right, you have a shared folder, and every few weeks, someone drops in a whole bunch of new files into that folder, right? So we're going to call it, it's an XLSX. We're going to just assume in this case, right? And they're dropping these files in, and you need to have a process that takes that and turns it into a table. Well, that sounds easy enough. But let us say for a moment that that data was not shaped very well. Let's go take a look. I'm going to jump in, staging, example 2. I'm going to go into my data folder here. Now, I'm going to open 2 of these, field report 1 and field report 2. So in this process, you're going out and getting these field reports, or, you know, someone on your team is running a field report, whether that's going to like doing a different audit, or you're doing like testing in a different clinic. Here, I was thinking about audits, but, you know, or doing surveys, things like that. The problem is that darn vendor keeps sending you the data the wrong way, right? So you have location here, you have your client pool, your revenue per year, and your last audited, and audited is misspelled, right? These are issues that we have with the data. First of all, this data doesn't look right. I'm going to hit Control C, and I'm going to hit paste transpose. I just had it. Where was it? Paste. It's like, did they change the there it is. This is the paste transpose. I feel like they changed the icon. Maybe they didn't. But this is how the data should look. And then the other problem you have here is this is field report 2. I'm in field report 1. You know, look, you got data coming out to here, right? Sometimes you're going to only have 2 items. So this is really a problem. We need to bring all these together, and we need to transpose them and make them look like this. So how do you do that quickly? Into one folder? Can you write Power Query to do it and then visualize it in Power BI as a table? Of course you can, but you must understand how to do it. So I'm going to show you how to do it, because actually it's not a whole lot of steps. And we do have the step-by-step, but it does require that you think differently about the problem. So let's jump in. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just go into Power BI and start a new one. New instance, as it were. You know when to send data to a therapist, right? When it needs validated. And then, of course, you should never call statistician's work average. It's mean. This is what I use I use these webinars to tell my terrible jokes. And there's going to be a lot more of them in the certificate program. So I'm jumping into Power BI here. And first things first, remember ITP, information transformation presentation. We're going to get the data. So I'll give it a second to get the data. All right, so it popped this up here. Now, what you need to do is you're going to click File. This is very weird, all right? I don't know why they named it this way. It's called File Folder, right? But if you're in Excel, it's File from Folder. Either way, you need to let them know that you're working with a folder, that you want to do work on the folder. So you're going to click Folder here. And now Power BI is going to say, well, what folder are you interested in? Simple enough. You'll click Browse. Unfortunately, it gives you this terrible browse folder thing here. We got to click on a million different things. I really like the other Windows Explorer better, but I know it's in staging example 2. So data folder. So you'll have to go and find it. Go ahead and click OK. You could always just find it in the Windows Explorer and just paste it in if that's easier. I'll go ahead and click OK. So here's how the file from folder works. And you can also do this with a SharePoint folder. Basically, it's going to look through all the files within that folder. And you can see it pick them up, and it's going to turn them into a table. So it's almost like what Windows Explorer is doing in the detail mode. We have all the field reports here. It picked up the type of file it is, a binary, the extension, the date access. So it's going to turn it into its own folder. Now, don't click on any of these buttons yet, right? You got to take a moment and think, what do I want to do here? Well, if I want to combine them all together, I have to think I want to combine them, but I also have to transform them, right? So I want to click combine and load, or combine and transform, not load, excuse me, combine and transform. That means I want to combine them and put it into Power Query for further instruction. So I've clicked that. It's going to pull up Power Query. We'll give it 1 second while it's doing that. Okay, so this is the most important part of this file from folder aspect. What they want you to do is select an exemplar file. That means whatever file we select and what we do to it, so is done onto the other files, right? So we're going to take an example 1, we're going to mess with it, and then it's going to run it across the other ones. And that's how we're going to get it into one table. So it opened up this file, which is an Excel file, and the first tab in all of them is called Report. You do need to have all the tab names do need to be the same in this example. There's a tricky way to get around that, but starting out by default, all the tab names have to be the same. So you'll note it's asking me, what is the sample file? I can select from any one of these, or I can let it pick, which is the first file I just picked randomly, right? But if I say I know something's interesting about any one of these, I can select these instead. In this case, we're going to keep it simple. First file, we'll select Report. So note that this looks like the Excel file, right? This looks like the inside of the Excel file that I showed you. I'll go ahead and click OK. So we're going to let it do its thing. It's going to pull up Power Query. Just give it 1 moment. Of course, if you were a data scientist, where would you go camping, right? In random forests. Hopefully some data science folks who understand that. You wouldn't bring synthetic wood. You would use a natural log. All right, well, let's see here. Did it bring up Power Query? There it is. Okay, so it brought up Power Query, and this may look very confusing. So I'm going to make this super simple, all right? First thing, let us notice what it did. It took all of the files that we had, and it just stacked them one on top of each other. And over in the source name, we can see where it pulled from. So it just stacked them on top. It's field report 2. You can see it just stacked them. So that's not really what we wanted, but we haven't told it what we wanted yet. So there's 2 different types of tables here. This data folder table here, this is our final one. So I'm going to make my life easier and just call it final. And then this sample file one, we're going to call it sample. So sample file pulls from what remember we said we wanted the first file. So this is what it pulled out. Now it has all this other stuff it put in here. You can go ahead and just click on this and pretend it doesn't exist, because we're not going to mess with anything in that. We're only going to mess with the sample in the final. So the final shows everything stacked on top of each other. That's not what we want, but it's trying. Let's give it credit for trying. But we need to give it further instruction to take it home. So let's take a look at what we can do in here. Now, the sample, whatever we do to this is going to happen to the rest of them. So that's why it was stacked. And what I also want to tell you is that when you do this, sometimes as you start doing stuff here, Power Query is going to automatically run it and it's going to break the final. And I'm going to show you how to fix it because it will break it this time. And the reason it breaks it is because when I start moving things around, like column names like survey models and column 3, they're going to disappear. So all you got to do is click an X where it says change type. I'll show that to you and it'll fix it. Now let's get this one ready to how we want it. You'll note here, the only information we care about is between rows 5 and 8 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead from Home tab. I'm going to click Keep Rows. I'm going to click Keep Range of Rows here. So in this case, what is the row range we want to keep? What's the first row? It's 5. And then how many of those rows starting from the first row do we want to keep? So it's not, so in this case, you would do, it would be 4 because it has to include the 5. So we'll do 5 here. Number of rows we want to keep are 4. So watch me be wrong about that. We'll see if it's 3. So I'll go ahead and click OK here like that. Nope, I was right. So it says, so you'll note it knocked out the top rows and the bottom rows. If you ever mess that up, you'll see there are these cogs over here. You can just click on a cog and just change it, right? So if I said, oh, well, I really should have been 5 rows, you know, you can just change it. It actually works very quickly. And we won't go into it, but you can also, you know, add different steps between steps so long as it doesn't break everything. Okay, so this is all the data we're interested in. What do we want to do next? We're going to go to transform here. You'll see there's a button that says transpose. Watch this. We transposed it. Wow, that looks incredible. That looks great, right? Exactly what we wanted. But one problem is we have column 1 through column 4. That's not useful, and it's kind of tacky. We need location through last audited to be our column name. So what do I do here? I can go to Home, use first row as headers. I click that. You'll see it says promoted headers. Then you'll see it automatically change the type. Okay, so this looks good. Location kind of has this colon here that I don't want. That's kind of because the rest of these don't have it. And then last audited is misspelled. And these are real, right? I tried to base this off of real life of things that I've been sent. All right, so this looks, we do a quick review, looks good. Now watch, I'm gonna click final over here. You see it's got this warning here. It's saying, well, we don't know where that survey models column went. Well, I deleted it, right? I deleted it, that's where it went. So what do I need to do to fix this? Well, where it says change type here, if I just click an X on this, that'll fix it. Because when I was trying to run the change type, it was trying to run it on a column that no longer exists. So look what happens when I click X on that. Wow, look, everything looks exactly how we want. We got our locations exactly where we want. It went through that entire folder of files and made this that quick. We don't need the source name. I'm going to right click this here and hit remove. So there we go. Now, one problem is you'll notice this says ABC123 next to the client pool ABC123. So it's saying these are coming as generic data types. We probably want them to be specific. So I can just hold shift, highlight all my columns here. And then where it says, let's see here. We don't want it from there. We'll go to transform and there's a button here, detect data type. So that's basically the change type button that runs automatically, or the feature, I should say. Click that, it changed the type. Data looks good. I'm going to go out and hit close like that. And let's see here. It should be running my changes, hopefully. Forgot to hit close and apply. I just hit close. So let's hit close and apply. It's running them. So it's creating it. And we'll just give it a second to do that. Okay, 32 rows loaded. Incredible. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the table visual right here. I'm going to drop it on. And let's see if we can just, maybe I should actually just do it from in here. Actually, let's see here. Let's drop in, last audit is a date. I'm just thinking, let's drop location here like that. And then we'll do client pool. We'll just put it all next to each other like that. Revenues. And then hopefully, I'm just hoping this date comes in how I want it to come in. Okay, perfect. That's fine. We'll have it come in that way. So you'll note here, there are 35 rows. Okay. So what happens is, you know, your friend is like, oh, I'm ready for I got a new field report. So they're going to go in and they're going to tell you, I have a new field report, but you know, they don't even have to do that. They're just going to go drop it into your data folder like that. So I'm going to drop in a new field report like so. And then I'm going to go to home here. And instead of going back into Power Query, I'll just hit refresh. And hopefully you'll see it. Right now, these are alphabetized. So actually, I'm just going to bring it back to the data view. This is if you're not putting it on a table, but for your back-end information. You'll note that there's 32 rows. If I go ahead and click the refresh button right here, it's going to run through that all again. So it's literally doing everything I just did. And you'll see that it added 4 more rows based off of that. And indeed, the visual on my front end is actually updated as well. Now, all I did was copy and paste one of the files. So there's probably some, let's see if we can find it in here. I don't see it yet. It's probably just showing me because it's showing me the uniques, but it did add those additional rows in here. So that's all it really does. And actually, yeah, you can see it. You can see it better on here. So we have 0 hunger in our cities, fences, foundation, making gift, and then it just repeats it there. So you can see that it automatically does that. So this is really why Power BI is so great. Now, one last thing I want to show you. Here because I think it's very important to understand is and this will be my last example. I'm going to drop a scatter plot in here, and let's see here. We'll drop in X will be our client pool, Y will be our revenues. Now, right now, it's summing these up automatically, and I'll talk about how you can just click Don't Summarize in the class and how to make it automatic. Okay, so while I'm looking at this, there really isn't a whole lot of correlation, and I'm okay with that. And maybe you might say, well, actually, I'm only interested in the people with the low client pools but high revenue, right? Because high revenue per client. You'll note here that you do see there's you have high client pools and high revenues, but all this data is made up. So even if there is a pattern in there, I made it up. All I really want to say about it is one of the things you can't do in Power BI, unfortunately, is let's say I wanted to figure out who they were. I can't drop the location anywhere such that it would automatically label my data, right? The data labeling on scatter plots is non-existent in Power BI. Them's the breaks. I talked to my buddy who works at Microsoft like a week ago because I was like, this can't be right. He's like, yep, I'm sorry. And he's one of the guys, he's a Power BI evangelist. So just note, if you're ever wondering, why should I do Power BI versus Excel? Here's one of the great reasons why. It's easy to label scatter plots in Excel. It's not easy in Power BI because Power BI is a data compression tool. It's trying to do it all. Visualize, data management, it's trying to be a lot of things for a lot of people. Now, I'm going to stop the screen share and I'm going to kick it back to the folks at Wake Forest. Just 1 second. I just want to tell you though, I'm very excited to be part of this descriptive analytics program. This is just like an example of the stuff we're talking about. And I think that it's often forgotten that really like descriptive analytics is all about these things, getting your data to the point of the decision maker so they know, to what decisions to make. Though I don't necessarily believe in the like descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive model that it must go in that order. I do think it is well understood that data like descriptives is the foundation, right? And as you can see that this can be very helpful in giving people the information that they want. So, and that's what I have. And back to you.
All right.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks, Jordan. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Cam. I'm the Associate Dean of Business Analytics at Wake Forest. And Jordan, I think you're going to share the...
That's right. I'm pulling it up right now. I got on such a tear that I forgot. I was like, oh, I need to share this. So I'm pulling it up right now.
Excellent.
I'll make my screen big and then...
Yep. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the analytics space. I agree with what Jordan just said, by the way, that people talk about descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, but I don't see that as an ordering. But I do agree that descriptive analytics and being able to slice and dice your data, get it cleaned up, be able to visualize it, glean any nuggets from it in terms of telling a story, that's sort of foundational. And so I appreciate everything that Jordan just went through. I just wish he had a little more energy, than he displays, but great job, Jordan. So what we've put together through Exec Ed, working with Whitney and Carrie, is a 3-course sequence that would enable you to earn a certificate in analytics for analysts. And we are going to do it over 3 courses, 2 days each. And each course will meet for 2 days, and it'll be from 8 to noon over those 2 days. So we have descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics and optimization. Jordan, if we could go to the next slide, and I'll come back and wrap up with a little description of that last point. So descriptive analytics, Jordan's going to handle. And by the way, you can take these courses individually if you'd like, and not do the certificate. But if you do all three and do this capstone I'm going to talk about in a minute, you'll get a certificate. But Jordan is going to do the Descriptive Analytics course. So March 9 and 10, 8 to 12. And he's going to do much more in-depth treatment of using Power BI and basically slicing and dicing data, managing real data. That's going to be a theme through all of our three courses, using real examples, real business examples, real data. Through the kind of things he demonstrated today, how do you display the data, and ultimately how do you influence with the data? And that's another theme that's going to go through all three of our courses. So next slide, please, Jordan. So predictive analytics will be taught by our award-winning professor, Tanya Balin. She's been chosen as our teacher of the year for the last few years in our master's program. She spent a fair amount of time at SAS before we lured her away to Wake Forest. And she's an expert. She has her PhD in statistics and has done a lot of work with industry. And she's going to talk about predictive analytics. So probably some forecasting, other predictive modeling, regression analysis, those sorts of things. And again, her focus is going to be on applying all this to the business problem. And then last, one more forward. Thanks, Jordan. April 28th and 30th, 8 to 12, I'll be teaching the Prescriptive Analytics course. And we're going to talk a little bit about some decision analysis, but most of the course will be around optimization. So I've had a consulting firm. I've been an academic all my life, but I've also had a consulting firm where I've done a lot of work with Fortune 500 companies in supply chain optimization. So we have some real world examples in that domain, as well as from finance and marketing. And all that's going to be within Excel, as is the predictive class. And we'll use something called Solver, if you're familiar with that, or Open Solver. It's free, that integrates into Excel. So if you take all three of those courses, then you can propose a little project, which I will mentor you on and oversee, and then you'll get the full certificate. So I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So I think we're going to maybe turn back to, get rid of the slides and turn back to the screen with just the folks on the screen, and then we'll take questions to the chat, I think, through Carrie. And questions for Jordan, or if you have questions about the certificate, I can handle those as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Jordan, question. Does Power BI have the ability to use polygons? We currently map those in ArcGIS, but we have our data in Power BI. Would be great to do within the Power BI system.
Don't know. That's such a good question. I've never, you can see my example, I got rid of them. I don't think so off the top of my head. I don't think so without making it, doing something a little more fancy with it. I mean, there is that other visual, that other map visual that can bring things to county level. But that really is based off of, that's based off of understanding what those polygons look like. I think that my answer to that is I don't know, but leaning towards no. And only because most complicated things you can't do with Power BI yet. As you can see, you can't even put labels on a scatter plot.
But you'll know by March 9th.
I will know. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look. I should say I'm definitely going to look up on that one. And as you know, I just hit my friend at Microsoft all the time with all these questions. Like, can it do this? Can it do that? What am I missing? So I'm definitely, this is already one I'm going to ask him after this.
Yeah, I've actually done some work with hexagons. A lot of the species and land distribution kind of problems. The U.S. government has things marked off in hexagons, but I've not done it in Power BI, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Jordan, we can, if you happen to come up with an answer on that in the next 3 days, we can certainly email everybody that was participating today with some feedback.
Absolutely.
One quick comment. I do have another question here, but a quick comment. We've had 2 or 3 folks come in terms of pricing on the certificate, and we will follow up with the links, the registration links, as well as the requisite pricing for the certificate as well post meeting. next question, and this might be one that takes us 3 or 4 minutes. Says, although this is a big question, can you talk briefly about how you think Power BI compares to other tools such as Tableau, Domo, Looker, and Good Data?
I think that's a great question. So on one hand, there isn't like there isn't like that much of a difference in terms of the ITP problem they're trying to solve, right? So when I worked with DataKind and we ran hackathons with nonprofits, right? A lot of people, it was kind of bring your own programming, bring your own code, bring your own tools. So I saw people use Power BI. I saw people use Tableau. In fact, I got exposure to like SAS, VA, Alteryx, all these other ones. So it was very cool because I got to use a lot of them, right? And many of them, at least Tableau and Power BI, particularly, are built off of very similar ideas. So what is the difference? Okay, so one, I will say that Tableau has had a head start. In terms of visualization, Tableau can do more. And I heard someone online, a colleague of mine wrote on LinkedIn, Jorge Cameos, I think, who wrote a few books on Excel data visualization. He said that Tableau is 80% visualization and 20% data management, right? But Power BI is almost 80% data management and 20% visualization. So Power BI has really tried to hone in on the visualizations they think people want. And then on top of that, create a framework to put more visualizations in there. And then on top of that, it really is thinking, the Power BI thought was, well, Microsoft has spent all this time creating these servers that were on-prem that are getting lots of data. How do we allow people to get access to that quickly? So, in many ways, the Power BI Power Query side is more developed, and the DAX side is more developed than the visualizations. But as you can see, the visualizations you can do a lot with. And then just one last thought on that, right? Because this is, again, in some ways, it's the difference between the Honda Civic and the Toyota Camry or Corolla, whichever is the comparable one. But in some ways it is like that. Within the Microsoft universe, Power BI is pretty amazing because it can actually do stuff with Teams. Like the integrations Power BI can do are significant. And Tableau, as far as I know, is not there yet. Again, I'm not a Tableau expert. Some of my friends are. They know it. They could probably correct me on this, but my sense is that the Tableau ecosystem is now just becoming part of Salesforce after the Salesforce purchase. But before that, it really didn't have necessarily its own ecosystem except for Tableau Server, whereas Microsoft has a very mature ecosystem as part of SharePoint and Office 365 Online, in which Power BI integrates very well.
Good. Jeff, question for you, and I've got a general sense of where this question is going, but it asks about the benefits of the analytics certificate and an analytics certification. And just in the last minute or so, perhaps, Jeff, you can just, couch your response based on what you're hearing in the marketplace in terms of demand for analytics talent that does have some advanced application or certification to it.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. The big benefit really is if you take the certificate, you're cutting across all those, I call them like tool baskets, right? So there is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive, and they all sort of are focused on different things. So if you take the certificate, you have that at some level of understanding, at least, the full spectrum of analytics. There are a lot of statisticians and data science folks actually who know nothing about how to model a decision problem as an optimization problem. That comes more from the operations research and management science literature. So there are advantages there to having the full spectrum of the tool set, if you will. Demand is still through the roof. I have had some data. If you look at the graph for jobs in analytics, it sort of is going like this, like you might expect. And then when the pandemic hit, like everything else, it dropped in March of last year. But then I was shocked, to be honest with you, at how quickly it rebounded. By June, it was back on its upward trajectory, like no dip had happened. This is using software called Burning Glass that tracks job ads. So demand is strong. If you're somebody who's in Excel a lot, but haven't, you do a lot in Excel, but you haven't really been exposed to the tools and methods of analytics, then this certificate will give you a great introduction to that and allow you to solve problems with some of these basic tools. Not as deep as a master's program by any stretch of the imagination, but an introduction to these tools where at the end of each one of these classes, you'll be able, I think, to see how to use what was discussed in your job. So that's really, I think.
Can I add to that?
Sure, go ahead, Jordan.
So, I mean, I can speak from my program specifically. You know, a lot of the stuff that I did when I was working with the Air Force, particularly with Excel and these other tools, because we couldn't develop, you know, a C++ program. So we had to do it in these things that could be approved, right? So everything I have is really hands-on. This is how to solve the problem at your job. You know, I'm a big fan of academic work. And so I try to take that and fuse it into, this is, you know, this is the problem that we need to solve. So you can see I mix the theoretical with the practical, but you know, I know you said it wasn't the coverage, let's say, of a master's, but in many ways it has its own sort of unique coverage because you can start using this stuff right away. You don't have to wait 18 months until after the master's degree. So that's really what it's geared towards.
Agreed. Yep, absolutely.
Well, we're a couple of minutes past. I do want to just very quickly, there was one final question and we'll wrap things up here. It says, can you please expand upon the final capstone project? Mary Alice, if you're still on, I know you and I had communicated earlier this week. It basically says, is it a one-page paper or more of a project that Dr. Cam just mentioned? It's actually a one-page application of the learnings from all three of the analytics disciplines that Jeff laid out. That one-pager will be reviewed in detail by Jeff and colleagues, and feedback will be provided. So we do want to encourage everyone, as you consider the certificate, to bring a business challenge, problem, issue you're trying to solve, and use the certificate course and learnings take you through solving that particular issue, and then get feedback from Dr. Cam. But for the sake, we'll also follow back up on that post-webinar.
Yeah.
I guess just to wrap things up here. Yes?
I was going to say, it's not a thesis.
It's not a thesis, no.
It's what you want to do with your company using some of the tools that we, and just a brief write-up like Carrie said. Anyway, go ahead, Carrie.
Yep. Well, we'll just take, just for the sake of being at the top of the hour here, I do want to thank Jordan for leading today's webcast. Really appreciate the passion, Jordan. It was a great run through. A lot of good questions. There are a few things that we were not able to get to in the Q&A session, but we're capturing the chat box here, and we'll try and get back to everybody if we did not respond to your questions. But again, for those of you who may not be aware, Wake Forest Executive Education provides both open enrollment and programs customized for personal and professional development. So again, as we've just discussed, the content Jordan just presented is part of the broader certificate in analytics. And again, for those of you who may be interested, and we got some questions on this, a link to the program along with pricing, course layout, scheduling will be sent along with a recording of today's session as follow-up. So expect that in the next day or two. But again, thanks to everyone for joining us today, and please stay safe and healthy.